Hey, what's going on, guys? Marman252 here, and those of you that are veterans of my channel will know that I don't often do serious videos like this, but this is something that needs to be addressed because it's you've seen it everywhere. You've seen it on the news. You've seen it really everywhere you look. You've seen stuff about what's going on and the protests and just this whole situation. And I just want to, rather than just giving you guys, links that you could use to help, I want to actually talk to you guys about what this situation is and how it can be improved. So I'm sure all of you know the situation with George Floyd up in Minnesota and the fallout from that and what happened afterwards. Now, obviously, as a Caucasian male, I can't speak from any kind of experience, but I can say that that was a disgusting, horrible, horrific show of force by police and something that should not ever be done, not just to people of color, but to anyone. I understand that Mr. Floyd was under arrest, but there is no excuse for that kind of force to be used on anyone, especially for a reason like writing a bad check. But it's clear that that happened for a reason. That kind of force was shown clearly because the officers in question clearly had adverse feelings for people of color. And that is against everything that this country has worked for the past really 60 years since Martin Luther King. There's just no excuse for it. There isn't. You think every day that America has solved racism and that there's not really any racist activity going on until you see something like this out in the open, presented to everyone, exposed. And then you realize that this hasn't gone away just because of a sort of accepted principle that racism is wrong. It still happens. As you've seen time and time and time again on the news, this is still happening. People are police are singling out people of color and choosing to use force against them, hurt them, kill them, just because of their feelings and their position. They're using their positions of authority to abuse people of color, and that is completely unacceptable in every way. I'm not going to be shy about making my opinions known on this matter. This was disgusting. This was terrible. This was not good in any way. And any situation like it, I have the same feelings for. The fact that this situation happened during this already stressful time, not even just in America, but all across the world, makes this so many times worse. Because now everyone's gathering for protests. Some people aren't wearing masks. Some people are going to be affected by COVID-19 because of the close quarters that people are in during these protests. Excuse me one second. And this can only lead to negative consequences. Not just because of the death of George Floyd and numerous other people of color from police brutality, but also because now so many people are in close quarters that numbers of COVID-19 are going to spike up again, which is exactly what we've been trying to avoid for the past 3 months. When I heard about this, I really couldn't believe it because, like I said, you think that there's no real racism going on. You think that it's few and far between that serious acts of racism happen, but this just shows that this happens all over the place and all the time. There's no excuse for that. Absolutely not. I absolutely do not condone what was done. I feel ashamed to be a Caucasian male after what was done to George Floyd. The officers involved brought shame to an entire race, and really to an entire nation. It just shows that people, just because you don't constantly see acts of racism doesn't mean it's not there. And just because it seems like racism has disappeared and dissipated over the last however many years, that doesn't mean that it's completely gone. And this doesn't just go for people of color. This goes for all ethnic groups. There's been fear against people of Arab descent because of the 9/11 attacks. And that's just as hurtful and just as terrible as this. I know obviously there weren't specific lives that were taken because of it, but it's still a disgusting show of racism. But moving on to the protests. I take the side of the protesters in this matter. Now, I want to make it clear, I take the side of the protesters, not the looters and the rioters. The looters and the rioters are just as terrible as the officers that did the killing of George Floyd. The looters and rioters are taking advantage of a terrible situation in this country and using it to their own benefit. They're not showing a point. They're not demonstrating. They're not protesting. They're using this terrible, awful situation to benefit themselves. And that is absolutely disgusting. I do not at all agree with what they're doing, and they have every right to be arrested and confined by law enforcement. Going to the actual protesters. As long as protests are done peacefully and no one is hurt, I agree with their cause. It is perfectly legal for protesters, peaceful protesters, to demonstrate what they believe in the way that they're doing right now. There's nothing wrong with that. And I honestly agree with their stance, and I take their stance. Because this situation is awful in every way. And is just so terrible to think about. Because it defies everything that this country's worked for so long. The fact that some of these peaceful protesters are being arrested shows that there is some kind of force that's being abused here. Now, obviously, the majority of peaceful protesters are being allowed to express their opinions and their feelings without any kind of conflict. But there are some peaceful protesters that are being arrested. I know you all have seen it. There's videos all over Twitter of peaceful protesters making a point, crying, sympathizing with police officers, and then being arrested for no good reason. It's not against the law to make your opinions known in this country. It is written in the Constitution, freedom of speech is a right. These people have every excuse to make their opinions known on this matter. And the fact that some of them are being arrested for doing nothing wrong is just as disgusting as this whole situation. Because it shows that that police are abusing their power, not just on people of color, but on people who are defending people of color. A lot of whom are Caucasian. I was surprised by the sheer number of Caucasian people that are in these protests. It's not just people of color in these protests. There's people of all ethnic groups in these protests because they all share this common knowledge that racism is wrong and this situation is terrible in every way. They're making their opinions known, and there's nothing illegal about that. As long as they're keeping their protests peaceful, they can make their opinions known. Freedom of speech is a right. I hate making videos like this because normally my channel is very positive, very happy, laughter, all that good stuff. And I'm sure you've seen videos like this all over the internet. So I'd hate to bring you guys down, especially on a weekend. But this is a video that needed to be made because this situation is awful in every way. And if I don't give my stance on this, people are going to think I'm just trying to ignore this situation, which obviously I'm not. I sympathize with the protesters. I have prayed for the soul of George Floyd. This situation should not have happened, obviously. And the fallout from it is going to do two things. It's either going to do nothing and it's going to be shut down, or it's going to enact serious change. I hope it's the second one. Because this situation has showed that law enforcement is inherently flawed and they abuse their positions to enact rage and violence and murder on people they don't like, on races and ethnic groups that they don't like, which is awful, completely terrible. I'm really running out of things to say because there's nothing I can say that hasn't already been said. This situation, this situation it just shows how flawed this country is. During a time of fear and struggle, people still choose to act on faulty principles and to commit acts such as this. But this situation also shows that this country is strong and united. People choose to go out and protest in close vicinity to each other, knowing that this virus is going around, knowing that there's a chance they could catch this virus. But they choose to protest anyway because this is what they believe in. They believe in this enough to sacrifice their health to make their opinion on this matter known, and to join with other people of this country to try and enact change because they believe that this situation is so terrible And that makes me proud to be an American. I would go out and support these protesters if I could. In fact, there's a rally going on in my town today, which I may go to. I'm not sure. It depends on, I don't know, it depends on several things, but that's not my point here. My point is, there's two sides to this situation. There's the side that says, this is disgusting, this should not have happened, this shows how flawed law enforcement is, and this situation is just terrible in every way, which it is, and I'm not saying it's not. But there's also the side that says, this situation is terrible, but we can do something about it. Yes, this virus is going around, but that's not going to stop us from banding together and making our opinions on this matter known until something gets done about it. And that is the fallout of this situation. That is what makes this situation, I don't know what word I'm looking for here. It's not good. The situation is not good. But it makes this situation one that we can learn from. One that we can look back on and say, this situation shows that there was a problem in the system that needed to be addressed, and that people marched and protested to make change. Now, I don't know how many of you are going to be seeing this video. I hope it's a decent number of you, because everyone needs to hear this message. George Floyd died because of horrific racism in this country. And many other people have met the same fate because of that. If you have a feeling, you are allowed to speak on that feeling. There's nothing illegal about that. So in this situation, if you feel that this is horrible and wrong, and that you need to take a stand, do so. As long as you're doing it peacefully, and keeping yourself as safe as possible in the process, feel free to do so. But do not take advantage of this situation, and loot, and riot, and I've heard that there's people stockpiling bricks and Molotov cocktails to throw at law enforcement officers. Are you kidding me? What is that accomplishing here? What is that accomplishing except making police angry and forcing them to use physical force against you and arrest you? All you're doing is riling other people up so that they get arrested. And I've seen that there are officers who are taking a knee and marching with the protesters and sympathizing with the protesters, and good on them. They see that this situation is just completely disgusting. And they're showing that the officers that killed George Floyd do not speak for all officers in this nation. My mother said this yesterday. There's twice as many good people in this country as there are bad people. Not all officers have the opinions of the officers that murdered George Floyd. Obviously. It would be foolish to think so. And they've shown that by sympathizing with the protesters, by marching with them, by showing that they agree with what the protesters are marching for. And that is beautiful in this situation. It shows that this isn't a two-sided affair. The police and the protesters are on the same side here. The police have shown that they think this situation is disgusting, just as much as the protesters have. And they've only used force Well, I shouldn't say they've only used force when they had to, because there have obviously been situations when they've taken things too far. The video of the 75-year-old man being shoved to the ground and knocked unconscious by two officers in Buffalo. They were charged, thankfully, which is good, because they deserve to be. There are people who have been wrongfully arrested or wrongfully hurt by police. But that number is so much smaller compared to the number of people that have peacefully protested and police have allowed to protest because they see what they're protesting for and they agree with it. They want to support it. And I'm not saying that the people who have been... I'm not saying that the officers who have gone out of their way to hurt people and to arrest people for no reason are a good thing and that it doesn't matter. Because obviously it matters. That's terrible. That's just as bad as this whole situation is. But there's so many more people doing the right thing in this situation. Shame on all of the officers that have wrongfully arrested and hurt people during this. Because it shows that they're using their position to abuse people, which is the same thing that happened to George Floyd. And at this point, race isn't playing a factor. There are Caucasian people that are being abused by police for speaking out. And that's terrible. That's horrible. The reason I'm making this video is because people need to be aware of this situation. And people need to be aware of the different sides that people can take in this situation and the different stances people can take here. Obviously, the murdering of George Floyd and so many other people of color by police brutality is a disgusting, terrible, horrible waste of life and a terrible showing for what this country stands for. I do not support it. I do not condone it. I sympathize with the protesters. I agree with what they stand for. And as long as they stay peaceful, there's nothing illegal about what they're doing, and I encourage them to continue to do what they're doing and to do their best to try and enact change in this country. I also sympathize with the I sympathize with the officers that are marching with the protesters and taking a knee for the protesters, and that are showing that they agree with the protesters. They agree that this situation is horrible, and they're trying to do something about it. I condone the rioters. I condone the looters. And I condone the officers that are abusing people during this time. That's disgusting. That's horrible in every way. There's no excuse for that. But this situation shows that all it takes is one situation to rile up millions of people. And to get millions of people to express their opinions and say, this is wrong. This is terrible. Why has this happened? There is something wrong here and I want to change it. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you feel strongly about this situation and want to help, I'll leave links in the description that you guys can donate to or look at if you want to make a change. Share this video with your friends because this is a message that needs to be shared with others. Rest in peace to George Floyd and all the others that have been affected and murdered by police brutality in this country. And God bless all of you during this situation. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.